Chapter 6 of The Adventures of a Nature Guide by Enos Mills. This Librivox Recording is in the public domain. The woods were made for the hunters of dreams, the brooks for the fishers of song. To the hunters who hunt for the gunless game, the streams and the woods belong. There are thoughts that moan from the soul of a pine, and thoughts in the flower bell curled, and the thoughts that are blown with the scent of the fern are as new and as old as the world. Sam Walter Foss. Chapter 6. The Arctic Zone of High Mountains. The peaks and plateaus of high mountains are distinguished by a climatic zone that is somewhat similar to that of Arctic regions. Many species of plants and birds of polar zones are found in the broken summit lands of the Rocky Mountains, the Sierra, and other high-lifted mountains. The Alps, the summit slopes of the Himalayas, and other Asiatic mountains, those of Mexico and the Andes, all carry their own characteristic Arctic gardens. Mount Washington and a few of the peaks of New England and New York, and numbers of the peaks in national parks carry luxuriant wild Arctic gardens on their high-held heads and shoulders. On Mount Rainier, between the timberline and the snowline, there is, perhaps, the greatest wild garden in the world. A great brilliantly colored wreath, a mile wide and 50 miles in circumference, encircles the peak, touched here and there with glaciers. On Mount McKinley, between 3,000 and 7,000 feet above the sea, is another splendid and magnificent garden filled with wild flowers and wild life. In the Colorado Rockies, the Arctic outpost that lies above the timberline embraces about 5 million acres. It has more than 1,000 peaks. These sky-held, island-like areas, more than 2 miles above the sea, are less known than islands of the South Sea. They carry lakes, canyons, tundras, moorlands, snowfields, and many a lichen-tinted cliff and rockslide. This mountain plateau region of the Rockies, which lies between the peak summits and the timberline, is a world by itself. It has its storms and its moving wreaths and strata of clouds, and also its full share of sunshine. It carries rare scenery, and its countless outlying rims and edges, where the plateaus of the sky break off and steeply descend into lakes, canyons, and mountain valleys, are seen commanding viewpoints. These are close to the stars, show the forests and streams, the lights and shadows below, and the sunset clouds on the nearby horizons of the sky. Brilliant wild flowers enrich the treeless prairies and the grassy, sedgy meadows. Many are dwarfed to tiny smallness, but others grow with even greater than lowland vigor. Their colors are varied and brilliant, and many are perfumed. In these skylands numerous birds nest and sing. Here bears and woodchucks roam. Grasshoppers leap and fan their wings, and butterflies float in painted glory. It is the home of the bighorn and the coney. The ptarmigan and the rosy finch, too, enjoy this realm throughout the year. But the summer visitors are also happy. Deer, elk, coyotes, southland birds, and eagles all make merry on its peaks and moorlands. So too do the flocks of birds of many species from lowlands and far north, who briefly visit it during the early autumn for picnic feasts, while journeying toward winter homes somewhere under the southern skies. One of the strangest wildlife gatherings that I have ever seen was in the Arctic alpine zone of a mountain plateau 12,000 feet above the sea. If you wish to have an experience entirely new, to see wild birds and wild animals in a happy commingling in the mountains, to witness a boisterous wildlife feast and fair. Then visit the realm just above the timberline in the Rocky Mountains when the birds are flying south. No food station along the way of migrating birds can show a more motley or spectacular gathering than an autumnal one on these heights. It is often made up of flocks of migrating birds representing numerous species. They come from Alaska, from the Barren Lands, the mountains of British Columbia, and the birch-margined streams of the North Woods. They are bound for winter homes and picnic lands in Texas, Mexico, Cuba, Orinoco, and Argentina. In addition to migrating birds, there are resident birds and visitors from down the mountain slopes, birds from the Southland that have summered in the heights, and birds that have come up from near but lower territory for this autumnal feast. They gather from near and far, like folks at a fair. Each spring most birds move northward a few hundred or a few thousand miles. Most of them nest and summer in the scenes which their ancestors selected. As soon as the children are ready to travel, they start for the Southland. As a rule, they travel by easy stages, though a number of species travel rapidly. But all must have food along the way, and in the healthy places of the heights, close to the eternal snowflakes, in the Arctic moorlands of the Rocky Mountains, 2 miles above the level of the sea, many birds pause and celebrate. With this celebration they close summer, begin autumn, and anticipate the winter. The setting for this festival is one of strange beauty and wild magnificence. The forest frontier with its scattering of dwarfed and storm-battered trees curtains this stage from the world below. Storied old snow piles are a part of the scenery, so too the high near peaks, the enormous moraines, the clear brooks, glad and wild with energy, vigorously beginning a 1,000-mile journey to the sea. Crags stand in healthy meadows, and huge scattered boulders are near the low-growing Arctic willows. Leaves in the forest edge are taking on autumn color, and in the open spaces the mountainside is bright with late flowers. In these moorlands are scattered the last and best of nature's crop of choice berries, kinnikinick, currant, wintergreen, blueberry, and bunchberry. In the lowlands the berries have been gone for days and even weeks. One feels that nature is taking unusual liberties in the plant world, that summer has added a postscript to her season and has climbed the mountain tops for the benefit of her feathered and furred creatures. Arctic plants are scattering their seeds to the winds. The succulent leaves of many of the plants which further down the mountain slope or in the valley have long since made plans for winter are here in season and hanging on in all their early summer beauty. With the last of summer, with its flowers, berries, and seeds, are grasshoppers and numerous accompanying varieties of insects that live upon the small plant growths. Butterflies also flourish in this land of much sunshine and few storms, and add their touch of beauty to the landscape. But they are susceptible to the slightest change in temperature or weather, and at the first warning from cloud or wind, drop to the ground and remain motionless until all is clear again. Besides resident and migrating birds, there are resident animals, and those that have climbed up from the lower slopes. These wild creatures, both great and small, are certain to find and to enjoy the rare feast that nature spreads. This region above timberline is little visited by man, and rarely are its spectacles seen. The bighorn sheep, the monarch of the mountain tops, sometimes looks on at these feasts. He is at home among the crags in any season or condition of weather, and travels over the steep and rocky prominences with as little concern as though it were the most ordinary of accomplishments. Sheep often cross the paths of deer and elk who go to these heights for choice pasture, and at this season of the year it is not unusual to find both grazing in some rich upland meadow. From an advantageous point upon an outreaching crag, an uninvited guest at their reception, I was absorbed in watching a pair of bears that were slowly, deliberately approaching a berry patch, when the shadow cast by the low soaring eagle diverted my attention. The bears, apparently quite unconcerned by the eagle's invasion of their territory, proceeded to devastate the berry patch. It was evident that their work of laying up supplies for winter hibernation had begun. White-crowned sparrows and juncos flew from the bushes, annoyed by the invading bears. Then flocks of birds, large and small, began to arrive. Within 2 hours I saw many of the species of bird life that I had followed with glass and camera in forest and lowland during the spring and summer months. White-crowned sparrows, who had here raised their second brood, were present in dozens. Bluebirds, too, were numerous with the fledglings of both spring and summer, and Bohemian waxwings had come to join in the general festivity before wandering down the earth for the winter. All made the most of this limited vacation, joining in the hilarity of the youngsters who had not yet learned to take life seriously. For with the bird children that predominated, it was an adventure. Literally thousands of birds were there. Among them appeared to be 100 or 2 robins, flocks of rosy finches, a few home ptarmigan in their winter stockings, gluttonous magpies, boisterous Clark's nutcrackers, insisting on order which they never kept, a pair of gray jays from the seclusion of the woods on their yearly outing, and pipits crowded almost out of their own home territory. Even the grouse family was represented by downslope flocks. Here, where a sumptuous feast was spread, and there was plenty for all during the short period of celebration, birds mingled and intermingled with apparent unconcern. How different would have been their manner toward rival neighbors in any other season and place. The ouzel had fled away along his alpine brook. He was not of the crowd. He rushed not for the feast, but held serenely aloof. Once he paused to sing. The clamor drowned his melody, though he was close to me, but his throat and gestures told of song. Following and skimming the stream with every dip and bend that it made, he finally dropped with the water behind a cascade. Merry chipmunks scampered about. Squirrels from below came in nervous haste and departed early. Their winter supplies were probably harvested nearer home. Curiosity alone made them risk the dangers of this promiscuous gathering spot. Each bird plainly was there for food and fun. If the truth were known, perhaps no visitor remained long. It seemed not unlike a depot of supplies, an oasis in the desert. Or was it also a bureau of information and a reception? Here all species came for fare provided at a time when there were scanty pickings in regions inhabited the year around. For the young birds it was a break in the first long flight. For the old ones it offered ideal opportunities to rest, a breathing spell after the strenuous demands of raising and training the youngsters. The scenes were constantly changing. New arrivals disturbed the peace and quiet of the spectacle. or making no impression on the moving pageant according to the nature and habits of the intruders. And, alas, more than once as I watched the banqueters, some stronger, more cunning foe sprang upon them from a hiding place near which they ventured and thinned their ranks. A mountain lion and hawks, both singly and in numbers, appeared in the course of the day. There was always a general scattering till they had taken a sure departure. Uninvited, unwelcome guests, they seemed to be the outcasts of the forest world, but all unconscious were they of the effect which their presence made upon their fellow creatures. They exhibited their natural traits of spying, prowling, and sweeping down upon their prey, which was not always successful in eluding them. And so one species fed upon another, showing the inexorable laws of nature and the bitter struggle for existence which cannot be suspended even during a short and pleasurable trip to this beautiful world of the mountain tops. In fact, here as elsewhere, caution, cunning, and endurance were required for these wild animal folk to defend themselves in their temporary abiding place, their exotic camping ground. For a time 2 coyotes lingered near, watching the scene and looking occasionally at each other as if exchanging similar ideas concerning the demonstration. One broke away and a few minutes later disappeared down the woods. The other sat back on his haunches and, as though having forgotten his purpose, became deeply engrossed in moral reflection appropriate to the occasion. The coyote appears to be the philosopher and the cynic of the wilds. Though ever hungry, ever seeking a feast, he seems always ready to show contempt for the duller wits of the world, and to indulge in a flow of philosophic thought concerning wild folk habits and follies. During a temporary calm in proceedings, 2 deer passed not far away. They had perhaps come down from a moorland where early snows temporarily covered their grazing land. A number of bighorn sheep, which had long been enjoying these unusual demonstrations in their stamping ground, stood gazing from a gallery of a boulder pile. They had no fear of being molested, for in a fraction of a second they could drop off the ledge and descend into the cañon in safety. I could have watched this mixed populace of the wilderness not only for hours but for days. What I had seen was only a small part of that wonderful transformation of the quiet, treeless realm which occurs once a year, occupying with variations several days. It is a strange and scenic common meeting place of bird and beast, friend and foe. End of chapter 6.